You can become an actor?
Very young, very young. I was, my mother.
Just like me?
When did you start?
No, I start acting like when I was 22 or 23, like that.
Oh, well, you were a young man. No, I was a boy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my mother was a director.
Oh, okay.
So she was a stage director. So when she needed children, she used my brother and me. My brother's 2 years and 9 months older. So she would put us in the plays that she was doing. So that started very young. And then in school, I did plays. When I was 11 years old, I did my first real play. The one when I was 7 years old, that was a backyard drama of The Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Cried wolf.
The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Do you know that story?
Yeah, yeah.
And we built a sheep out of 2x4s and bought me a wolf mask, and I played the wolf.
You played a wolf?
And my brother played the boy who cried wolf.
And he was crying?
And no, the name of the story is The Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Oh.
Wolf, wolf, when there's no wolf.
Oh, okay.
Just because he was bored looking after the sheep.
Exactly.
And he cries, wolf, and everybody comes out to kill the wolf, and he just laughs at them because he tricked them.
And the very last...
and he did that twice, and then the third time they don't come.
Yeah.
And the wolf kills all the sheep.
Okay.
And it's his fault because he, yelled wolf twice.
Yeah.
So he played the boy who cried wolf. I played the wolf, and we had two neighbor boys. They played the townspeople who came out.
Oh, okay.
And we invited his parents and grandmother and my parents. They were our audience in the backyard.
So from very beginning, there were the germs of
Sure.
acting in you.
Yeah, yeah.
So after finishing your college and university, as you said that University of
Southwestern University in Georgetown.
Georgetown, and after that you went some
I was
acting school too.
Yes, I went to acting school after I was a theater. I majored in theater at Southwestern University and speech, and then after working for a couple of universities for 6 years, I decided to become a professional actor. And then, so at 28 years old, I went to acting school, went to graduate school at SMU in Dallas. And that was a 2-year program then. It's 3 years now, but it was 2 years back then. And I stayed in Dallas for 5 years after that, and then moved to New York.
So when you wrote your first drama?
That was pretty late. I was forced into that. I did not want to do it. I was forced into it. This was when I was 50. I was the artistic director for the Palace Theater in Georgetown. It was an old movie theater, and folks in town saved it. It was going to be turned into a retail space or something. And everybody who had gone to movies there when they were young, nobody wanted that theater to go away. So a bunch of people chipped in some money and kept it from being sold. Yeah. And so after they did that for a few years, I joined their staff as artistic director. And so for my second season, coincided with the 150th anniversary of Williamson County and the city of Georgetown. They were both started in 1848. So back in 98, this was literally in 97, our district attorney, and he and I were talking at the big 4th of July fireworks thing down in the park, and he was telling me about a piece of history in Georgetown. I had been living there since I was 14 and had never heard this story. I never knew this thing had happened.
Oh, all right.
I couldn't believe that I hadn't heard about this. Apparently, in 1923, the very first prosecution of the Ku Klux Klan Some of you may not be familiar with the Ku Klux Klan. It was a white supremacist organization that came into being right after the Civil War in the 1870s. It died out and then started again in the early 1900s. In fact, the very first movie ever made, was called The Birth of a Nation, and it glorified the history of the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh, okay.
That was made in 1925.
All right.
Well, in 1923, the first successful prosecution of a member of the Ku Klux Klan occurred that actually sent somebody to prison for an act of violence occurred in Georgetown, in the Williamson County Courthouse, in what some people might call the Deep South.
Oh, okay.
But it was the first time that the Ku Klux Klan ever was sent to prison. Well, that trial was prosecuted by a 29-year-old prosecutor named Dan Moody.
Oh, okay.
Everybody thought he was committing political suicide because the Ku Klux Klan, number one, was very popular and very violent. So they were sure his career was over because he was willing to prosecute these people. But he didn't care because he believed in justice more than he believes in getting along with people. And he won the case. 4 people went to prison after 2 trials. They only got 5 years, and one guy got 2 years for lying, for perjury.
For lying.
For lying in court. And that made Dan Moody's career. He right after that, he ran for Attorney General of the state of Texas against a Ku Klux Klan candidate and beat him. And then he ran for governor against another Ku Klux Klan candidate and Ma Ferguson, who was the incumbent governor at the time. She was very corrupt. She and her husband, Pa Ferguson, he had been run out of office for corruption, so they elected his wife, which meant so.
We talk about this kind of thing, but I'm interested to know about as a director, when you started as a director.
Pretty much then. I wrote that play. He told me that he was writing a book, our district attorney. He said, I'm writing a book about that. And he said, I thought maybe when I get it finished, when I send it to my publisher, maybe you could invite some of your actor friends, 3 or 4 actor friends, to come to the actual courtroom where this trial took place and maybe read some excerpts from my book for an audience of 30 or 40 invited people. He said, would you be interested in that? And I said, no.
Nope.
What? And I said, if I'm going to write a play, if I'm going to do it for an audience one time, I'm going to do it for an audience for several times. Why just do it once?
Exactly.
So when you get your play, when you get your book finished, when you send it to your publisher, bring it to me, and I'll try to find someone who can write a play based on that. And we'll let that be the Palace Theater's contribution to the anniversary celebration of the sesquicentennial. Well, he did just that. It was an amazingly good book. And so I called 5 playwrights here in Austin, all of whom were very highly thought of playwrights. And every one of them loved the idea of doing a play about the trial, but they didn't want to adapt Ken Anderson's book. They wanted to do their own research and write their own play.
Oh, okay.
And I said, well, I'm sorry, but our objective here is to dramatize this book because it's our district attorney's book. You know, I love your idea, but that's not what I'm selling here right now. I'm trying to find someone who can write a play about this book. And I couldn't find anybody. And we had already put it in the season for September, and this was in June, that I still didn't have a play. We were supposed to start rehearsals in July, and I didn't have a play. So I had to write it myself, and I'd never written a play, not one in my whole life.
And after that,
and here I am writing this play. And when I finished writing this play, I realized I had written a play for 39 characters in a little town where I couldn't find 6 actors to rub together for an audition for anything. How am I going to find 39 actors, including 9 children, FARIDI? 9 children. So what I did was I recruited a judge to play the judge, a bailiff to play the bailiff, lawyers to play the lawyers. I don't think I had any Klansmen playing the Klansmen, but I could have because they were very convincing. But I found a doctor to play the doctor.
And who was the hero?
The hero is, well, you know, that's funny. Dan Moody would be considered the hero.
Really?
The prosecutor, the one who sent them to prison. He's the one who sent the Klan to prison.
Oh my goodness.
So he's the hero of the story. But as far as I'm concerned, the real heroes of that story were the jurors.
Exactly.
Because if you're going to send a violent organization like the Klan to prison, what do you think they're going to do to you, to the jury? And I mean, the jurors had sent their families to other cities with other family members to protect them during the trial from possible harm by the Klan. People were scared. People were scared. He had to make sure that there were no Klan members on the jury. Well, that's not easy to do. So it was, to me, these are the guys that were the heroes because they knew full well. That's my next play. That's the play I want to write. They talked for a few minutes. They knocked on the door and told the bailiff they had a verdict. In 20 minutes.
Wow.
20 minutes. They found these guys guilty.
So when people find that you are very humorous.
Yeah, we put some comedy in there because it was such a serious. I mean, the guy was beaten. He was pistol whipped. He was whipped on his legs, just turned into hamburger meat. I mean, he was. Then they chained him to a tree in Taylor, and they poured hot tar on his head and left him for dead. I mean, it's a very serious play. It's very upsetting. So we had to put some, what we call comic relief in there. So I put a couple of, we were going to do 4 shows. That's what we did for all of our plays that first season, 4 performances. So that's what we were going to do here. Well, then we found out those first 4 shows sold out before we ever opened the first one. Because the word of mouth was so good. Everybody was talking about this play.
Amazing.
Especially that we were doing it in the actual courtroom where the trial took place. And so everybody was talking, everybody got excited. So we sold out. There were only 150 seats in the courtroom. So 150 people, 4 nights in a row, and we were done. So we decided to add the next weekend. Well, we sold out those 4 before the first ones ever opened. So we had sold out 8 performances before the show opened.
Wow.
Well, the show went over so well, we added 3 more to that run. So we ended up, instead of doing 4, we ended up doing 11 performances to a sold out house every time. Well, we did it 2 more seasons, 2 more summers. And every show sold out. So we just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And everybody loved it because it was our history. This is what I think is important about history.
Exactly.
Is for communities to start telling their own stories. And if any of you live in communities that have great history and you want people to know it, the theater is the place to do it because it was our history. This is what I think is important about history.
Exactly.
Is for communities to start telling their own stories. And if any of you live in communities that have great history and you want people to know it, the theater is the place to do it. Theater is the place to tell your town's history. You'll have the most fun. It will be the hardest thing you've ever done, and it will be the most satisfying thing you've ever done. Because then the history of your town becomes alive. And nothing makes a town, a community, more than knowing that their history is a living history. We're making history right now. Celebrate that. The theater continues to do that show every few summers, even now. That was 20 years ago.
So,
and we've done it 8 times.
The thing is, if we like to save our history, we're good people. Do you know that? If you don't know, keep watching.